Okay. All right. We should be live at this point. Super. So I'm going to just get started. Sorry, just closing out a bunch of extraneous things so they don't get lost while I try to maneuver between the different things. And we're recording. And I don't think I have to put closed captioning on anymore. Maybe I do. Show captions. Okay, great. All right. So today we're going to be talking all about mechanics, and this is handler mechanics. So we're going to be focusing, oh my gosh, the captions are right in my face. Okay, there we go. So we're going to be focusing on how we can improve our own mechanics to make our dogs more successful. So I'm going to start with a little bit of PowerPoint to talk about some different things, and then we're going to get right into video examples as well as exercises that you can do to practice this at home and improve your skills. So hold on one second while I make this big, while I begin this. Share PowerPoint, super, and let's make it slideshow, play from start. Okay, so better human mechanics for better communication. So how will you benefit from doing these types of exercises? Because look, nobody wants to do exercises without their dog because it feels like you could be just working with your dog and getting better. But I promise you there is a huge benefit of increasing your skills, even marginally, when you're talking about training results. So when we have better timing, we have better communication. So what does that mean? Have you ever clicked your dog for doing something and you clicked the wrong thing and they took like that moment in their brain to decide, oh, this is exactly what you want me to do, even though that was the wrong click? Um, the more that we have better clicking skills, the less we have to clean up our clicking mistakes. Now, we're always going to make mistakes on clicks. I was just doing my videos for the new course, the behavior interruption course, and I made a bad click and I slowed it down so you could see the bad click. And you know what? It didn't really matter. But there's some cases where the dog just like hangs on to this like one click that you made. So we want to try and clean up our clicking whenever we can. So we'll get also less unwanted behaviors. So when the dog is confused about confused about your mechanics, or you're slower on grabbing things, or you're fumbling around, not sure where your treat pouch is, all of that, it makes the dog a little bit more impatient, especially for our young dogs or our dogs that tend to be grabby. So cleaning all of that up will get less grabbing at treats, which means less ouchy hands for us. It also means we're going to have cleaner loops. So when we're talking about our training cycle, we want to cue the behavior. The dog does the behavior. We mark it, reward it. As soon as the dog finishes eating it, we can either cue the behavior, or if we're shaping it, the behavior comes again. The cleaner we can make our loops without the dog just going off and doing something else, the more efficient our training will be and the less time consuming it'll be. We're going to increase our observation skills, less accidental clicks. I talked about that. We're going to also have less frustration and disengagement from your dog. When you're unclear about what you're doing, or you're taking a long time because the muscle memory isn't there, the dog is much more likely to get frustrated or disengaged. So the more we can learn how to be efficient about our mechanics, the easier it is for our dog to stay engaged with us. And then we also, it can also become second nature, so you can focus on the training. Once you're doing this, some of the times when I'm doing these presentations for y'all, I have to think hard about how I'm doing each thing. And that'll come down to when I start showing you the multi-treat handling. I had to really break that down for myself, because I've been doing it so long, I don't have to think about it. And that's where we want to get with you with all of your mechanics is, oh, I've been doing it so long, I don't have to think about that, because now I can focus on my training. Um, and, we become predictable, so the dog can focus on learning. The more predictable we are, the easier it is for your dog. We'll also do have less dropped treats when we're fumbling with our treats and dropping treats. They start looking on the ground more often. That again is going to happen. And we'll talk about the things that affect us dropping treats later. But yeah, we can drop less of our treats. It means that we, again, have cleaner loops, which means more efficient training. And also, you can impress your friends with your amazing mechanics for your dog training. Yeah. Okay, maybe not that one, but All right. Why train these skills without your dog? So, like I said, a lot of people don't want to spend the time to train these skills without their dog because it's time you could spend training. But adding a dog to anything makes everything more complicated. So, when you're first learning to ride a horse, and I realize dogs are not horses, however, when you're first learning to ride a horse, they never put you a green horse with a green person. So a brand new horse with a brand new person. Why? Because that's a recipe for it being very confusing and potentially danger in that regard. A lot of times we're putting green dogs that don't know anything, with green handlers that don't have, haven't practiced their skills yet. So this is a way that we can practice our skills away from our dog so we can be more competent handlers for our dog. So it's the same thing when you're thinking about like sports like frisbee, right? When you're thinking about learning how to toss a frisbee, like I'm not excellent at tossing frisbees. You want to start that away from your dog so that they're not getting all of these garbagey throws that I'm going to make, and not trying to jump for all this stuff that they can't, that's hard for them to get. I wait until I'm more consistent before I introduce the dog into that. And also what we're going to be doing is breaking habits and building new neural pathways. I see out there a lot of mechanics that are just a little bit sloppy that could be improved for a better experience. And also, we've talked about this in the past, how can we get our dogs to learn our verbal cues more quickly, because our dogs tend to be much more visual learners. Well, when we clean up our mechanics, they're going to be able to learn our verbal cues much more quickly. So today we're going to break down these skills just like we do for our dogs when they're learning a new thing, so that we can also build on our successes. So let's get started with that. Oh, maybe not. Oh, and the other thing is you should be putting your dog away. I think I say this later on, but we should be putting our dog away when we practice this stuff so that they're not continuously hearing the click without being reinforced. So, put them in another room while you're practicing this stuff. Okay, what affects your mechanics? The clicker that you use, so the type of clicker. So during this, all this filming, I used a clicker that I don't use very often. And I used a treat pouch that I don't use very often because I wanted to also be practicing for myself. So the type of clicker that you use, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The treat pouch or bowl that you're using, is it easy to get into? Is the treat pouch big enough? Does your hand fit in it? Does it make crinkly noises? All of those things affect it. The treats you use, you're actually going to see me in this session show you how an example with both kinds of treats. And when you're practicing, you should practice with different types of treats as well, because a smooth treat or a kibble is going to feel very different than a moist, chewy treat. Proximity to you. So how close is the treat to you? Is it on a table? Is it, on your left hip? Is it behind your back? You'll see examples of that as well. Dominant or offhand. So I am right-handed, but because I've worked dogs on my left side my entire life, my left hand is more adept at treating than my right hand is. So when I have to think about working a dog in right hand heel, it takes a lot more for me to be able to pick that treat out of my treat pouch and feed it to the dog. And I'm much more clumsy about it because I've spent so much time using my left hand for that behavior. So you can train either hand to do it, even if you're right dominant. My left hand, honestly, is just, probably 75% better than my right hand is for this kind of thing. So I have to work on my right hand mechanics as well. Location of the dog to you. Is the dog in front of you where you can see them, or are they by the side? We're actually going to work on an exercise where we're not looking at the dog, you'll see. Because that makes it even harder. Whereas if it's in front of you, it's a lot easier for you to hit the target, which is their mouth. And then environmental factors, lighting, moisture, the things that are affecting your environment. So I was working a dog recently and I had a biothane lead and they were a very wet mouthed dog. And now I've got a slippery lead with a slippery hand, and that affects how you work with your dog. And finally, distractions. Is there music playing? Is there another dog in the room? All of those things are going to affect your ability to execute your mechanics well. So like with dogs, we want to practice in a more sterile environment when we first start and then progress to more challenging environments. Okay, clicker options. So you do not have to use a clicker. That I will preface it by saying that. However, there are situations where a clicker is going to be a better option for you. So I want you to think of like using your verbal, like your yes, like your like a butter knife. Butter knife works great for most things, whereas your clicker is more like a scalpel. A scalpel is useful for making very precise movements, right? And that's what we're doing with our clicker is we're capturing very precise things. So do I need a clicker to teach sit? No, but if I'm going to want to use a clicker to teach more complicated behaviors, I should practice it on my sit first and getting the moment that dog's butt hits the ground or the motion to go into that sit. So yes, you can absolutely use your verbal cue, but know that when you're using a verbal cue, the dog has to weed through, especially if you're chatty, the dog has to weed through which words are important and which words aren't important. Where the clicker, no matter who clicks it and no matter what's going on, the clicker always means that there's food. So there's no math going on in the dog's head to decide if that was their marker word. Again, I train them interchangeably. My dog knows both. And, there's some skills where you just don't have enough hands to hold the clicker as well, though there are options for that as well. And some people will use a mouth click, like a tongue click, like that. That is also an option if you're able to do that. That's too hard for my brain, so I'm either going to use the verbal or the clicker. But in this, in this webinar that we're doing, excuse me, we're going to use the clicker because it's the harder one to manage. So I want to practice managing all of that at the same time. As far as what clickers we use, so I'll just show these here. So this is the one that I use the most. I will try and throw links down below. And if I don't, someone comment so that I remember to do it. I use these the most. I bought like 100 of them because I lose them all the time. This is another common one. I find that this one is less loud. So dogs that are more noise sensitive, I can use this one. If you do have a noise sensitive dog, you can put it in your sleeve and click it. It's a little bit less loud. There's also a ring version that goes on your finger. Okay, so I clicked that. So just as a good example, so Whip was in my bedroom, which is the next room over. I clicked that clicker once and she came in here. And this is why it's really important for you to put your dog away, when you're practicing that. So there's a ring clicker that you can also use. I've bought 2 of them and proceeded to lose both of them. But I do like them if you're trying to not have things dangling off your wrist, especially if you have bitey puppies that want to jump on that. So that is also an option. Those are the ones that I tend to use for clickers. All right. So we got this kind. And I use this one, I think, for most of the filming that I did. All right, let's go back to hold on one sec. Okay, so the first thing, while I get this up, the first thing that I did when I first started out in, is this right? Yeah. The first thing that I did when I first started out in dog training is I started watching basketball games, which is very, oh my gosh, I need to get it out for recording. Oh my gosh. Sorry, everyone. I promise I know how to use a computer. There we go. Nope. Play from start. Play from current slide. Okay. I started watching basketball games. Why? Not because I care for basketball at all, but because it's an opportunity to practice my clicking. So when we look at a basketball game, what I would do is I'd take my clicker out and I would click every time that the ball would hit the ground. Why do I like this game? Because it also teaches you to start looking at body language and precision, because sometimes the people will like turn it over like they're going to dribble the ball and then they'll hold it. So you really have to watch what's going on. Now, if it's too fast for you, you can always slow it down. So I literally just go to YouTube and type in basketball game and then I'll watch like a minute or 90 seconds of it, practice my clicking and be done. Or while you're, if you like basketball while it's on your TV, or, if your partner also likes basketball, do that. So in theory, this should turn on. Or not. Great. Okay. Well, that's not working. Awesome. Okay. So, so what I will say is, sorry that it's not working, but just go to YouTube and this is the NBA Classic, put that in 90 seconds. And every time that ball hits the ground, you want to hear your clicker going off. One way that you can also do this is you can tape yourself doing it and side by side it and see if it's actually working. Because you can, like, I've been doing a lot of videoing for a bunch of different courses right now. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll slow down the video to 50% to make sure that my click is at the moment that I want that click to be at. So basketball game, great place to practice your clicking. All right, so now we're gonna do I'm gonna show you a different exercise. That is with a deck of cards. So I recorded myself just shuffling through a deck of cards, and I'll make this available too so that you can practice with it. But this is another great exercise for practicing your clicking. So what we're aiming to get here is I see what I'm looking for. So I've targeted the thing that I am looking for, and I'm going to click for it. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch this deck of cards, and you're going to pick a suit. So, say you're going to click only for hearts. And every time you see a hearts, you're going to click for that as I put it down. And we're going to use this a couple times. So let me go through it. And I'm actually going to just be quiet while it runs through so that, oh, my thing disappeared. Hold on one second, everyone. I gotta get back into my video because it disappeared. Okay. So I'm going to be quiet during it so that you can just run this and practice. So here we go. Okay. So that's a great game to play. I'll put a link. I also put this up on YouTube so that you can mess with the speed settings. So I'll put a link on Patreon below this deep dive so that you can use that to practice with. Because believe it or not, I looked for like someone who had already just flipped through a deck of cards and I couldn't find it. So, had to do it myself. Okay, so that's us just practicing our clicking, our ability to see something and mark at the same time. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the structure of how we're training behavior. So let me share my screen. Hold on. All right. So clean mechanics and order of operations. So we want to talk through what it should look like when we are training behavior. If the behavior is on cue, so say we have a sit on cue, what it looks like is we're going to cue the behavior, the dog does the behavior, we mark the behavior, we reach for our food, we feed the dog, and then the hand returns to neutral. Remember that whatever your body is doing can become part of the cue for your dog. So the more your hands can be resting in a neutral position, the easier it will be for your dog to discern what the actual cue is, especially when we're talking about hand signals and body cues. I've definitely trained Jake at one point that he only crosses his paws when I'm on the right side of his body. So what we do with our body matters. Having a neutral hand position can be helpful. If you only, for instance, put your hands behind your back when you're healing or something like that, that soon becomes part of the cue for the healing. So we really want to think about what our body is doing. And then if we're shaping a behavior, so when we're shaping that behavior, we're breaking it down into little bits and there's not going to be a cue for it. The dog is just in this behavior loop where they continue to do a behavior. We're marking for something that we like. So then the behavior happens, we mark, we reach for the food, we feed, and then our hands again return to neutral. You'll see this practiced here. What my point is here is that we need to separate everything, especially when we're talking about cueing behavior. So when we are cueing, we want to make sure that we cue, and this we'll talk about adding a new cue to a behavior. But then when we mark, we don't reach for the food until we've marked. Okay. So what I see a lot is people are clicking, and at the same time that they're clicking, they're reaching for the food. If you're a dog, you're watching their hand go to food more than you're listening for the click, and we want them listening for the click. So we're going to practice making sure that we can clean up that portion of the mechanics. So it's mark, reach for food. Okay. So we're going to work on an exercise for that. Where do our hands rest? It's wherever you need to do to not reach before you click. So if that's by your side, if that's when we're practicing this on the table, if that's behind your back, whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that your hand is not reaching for food before you click and muddying the waters of your dog being able to perceive what it is that you're clicking for. Okay, so, okay, now we're going to switch the video because I made myself a note to do that. All right, so we're going to video. All right, and I need to share my screen. Okay, so we're practicing the mark, reach, and feed, and we're going to practice with both hands because we want to be able to be ambidextrous. So we're going to get 2 bowls. And in this exercise, I have 2 bowls next to each other, and we're going to continually make everything progressively more challenging. But to start with, all we're doing is practicing our click and move food without muddying the waters and moving our hands before we've clicked. I start with hard treats, and then we go to soft treats. So mark, feed, hand returns to neutral. Mark, feed, hand returns to neutral. And as we get better at it, we can get faster. And then I switch hands and practice with my right hand, which is my weaker hand. And it is okay to go slow at first so that you're patterning this behavior in the way that we want it to be. Because again, we're trying to build pathways in our brain that say, this is how we do this thing that we don't have to think about. Okay, so same procedure, but with soft treats, they feel different. It's important to practice with both. This is also why when we get treats that are a little more challenging to work with, it can affect our training because we're sloppier with them. So like I'm thinking like shredded chicken, that kind of thing, are harder to work with. So when you're thinking about treats for your dog, you also want to think about your ability to handle those treats and administer them. Okay. So now we're going to talk about preload. Actually, I think there's one more thing I want to talk about over here first. Okay, no, we'll do this first. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, too many things. Preloading our hands. So one of the things I noticed when I was training with one of my friends recently is that they were struggling to hold multiple treats in your hand. And I forget that that is something that you need to practice to be able to do well. Whenever you preload your hand, so by preload, I mean you're going to have multiple cookies in your hand. This like is something that I might do if I want to be able to treat very quickly, or if I have a young dog who's going to get distracted, anything like that. I might preload my hand. So we want to look at what the mechanics are for doing that. Typically, I'm going to take 5 to 10 treats or so and put them in my hand. So this is what that looks like. So I'm taking my treats and I'm loading them. So I've got 10 or so treats in there and I'm pushing them to the front of my hand. So they're where my fingers are. Once they're up at the front of my hand, I'm going to close my hand around the treats. And then I'm using my first finger and my thumb to manage each treat individually. Now, we are going to talk about other options at the end for if you don't have the dexterity for this, because sometimes some people are not going to have the dexterity. I have a lot of arthritis in my hands. Eventually, I won't be able to do this, but I can do it for now. So I wanted to show you what that looks like with that multi-treat management system. And if I have multiple treats in my hand, and the important part of this, and you're going to see this a little bit more thoroughly later, is that the dog needs to know that if there's food in my hand, the food gets delivered when my hand is like this, and my food is not available when my hand is like this. This is something I learned a while ago from Hannah Brannigan. She does it really well. But basically, there's an on and an off so that it's very clear when food is coming. So let's watch this. So I put it in, turn hand back over, rotate between my fingers. So I just keep pushing the next one up between my fingers, and then I reload, next one between my fingers, okay? So that's something you don't necessarily have to be able to do, but there are occasions where being able to preload your hand is helpful, and it's always just pushing that treat between your fingers, turning it over, and you're using your middle finger and your thumb to roll that next treat up to your first finger. So it's like, roll it up, spit it out, roll it up, spit it out. All right. So I want to show you, there's one other game that I want to talk about that I like to play for being able to better understand the clicking game and how we relate to our dogs, and especially how we relate to shaping. I didn't take a video of it because I think most people understand how the hot cold game works, and this is kind of what we're going to play. So when I first started, when I interviewed for my position as an apprentice guide dog trainer, it was a 3-day interview, so pretty stressful. And one of the things that we did was played the clicking game. So basically what we do is we take a human, and we're going to have one trainer and one human, and the trainer is going to shape the human. And this is a great game to play with your kids, or have a few beverages, play it when your dog friends are over. And so you're going to pick something that you're going to shape the dog, the person, to do. You're going to stay confined to one room so that everyone is in the same room, but it might be something as simple as sitting on a stool, or it might be picking up a stapler, whatever it is. You're going to be training that dog to do that. And you're going to have M&Ms because everyone likes snacks. So we get our M&Ms, and the trainer's going to have the M&Ms. The trainer's going to have the clicker, and we're going to be clicking successive approximations towards what we want that person to do. So we might start with trying to get the location correct. So they start walking towards the door, and that's not right. So you ignore that, but then they take a left turn, and that's closer to where you need to go. You click the moment they take that left turn. They'll start offering behavior as you get closer and closer, and then you'll start selecting down the behavior that you want. It's a super fun party game to play, and it's a great way to understand how frustration develops in our learners, and also to work on our observational skills. So that's a pretty fun one that I definitely recommend that you check out. Okay, so now we're going to talk about adding a cue. Let me go back to my video. This one. Okay, so when we're adding a cue, I get asked a lot, like, okay, now I've got this shaped behavior, but I want to add a cue to it, or I have this behavior on a physical cue. So like, for instance, if I want my dog to sit, I can raise my hand and I want them to sit, but I don't have them on the verbal cue. And the thing that happens quite a bit is people will say sit at the same time they're raising their hand. And for the dog, they're only watching your hand. The relevant information for them is your physical body information. So we need to make sure that we are separating out the verbal cue and the physical cue. In the same way that if we're going to add a cue, we're going to cue it right before. So if we're in a training loop, I should have done a visual for this, but if we're in a training loop where the dog is, say, doing a chin rest, right? So the dog does a chin rest, we click, we reinforce, the dog does a chin rest again. So we're in this behavior loop. We want to add the word chin. So it's going to be right after the dog eats the food and before they rest their chin, like right when they're going towards resting their chin, we say chin, we mark and reinforce. So we insert it in there. We want to make sure that our mechanics are clean for this so that the dog can understand what we want them, what we're trying to do, which is get them to understand that verbal cue. Okay, so let me show you the exercise for this. So again, we're just breaking down very simple exercise. All we're going to do is say the word, then mark, and then do the feeding.
Side.
So I'm using the word side here.
Side.
Side, click, feed,
Side.
return. Side, click, feed, return. That's what we're looking for here.
Side. Side. Side.
Just separating those out. Okay, so that's a pretty simple one. But again, just adding that word because we're going to make things more complicated now. So now we're going to practice being able to hit our dog's mouth. So hitting the target with our hand, which is our dog's mouth. So the first exercise for this, we're going to need something that's about the height of your dog, and then you're going to put a bowl on it. I'm also going to use a cone at some point in this, but I just wanted to show you different setups for it. So I've put a bowl around where my dog's head would be at my side. You can do this in front of you. To start, I do a lot more treating at my side because it's pretty, for most of the things that I do, having a dog stare at me in front of me isn't useful. And we do enough of that already unintentionally throughout the lives of our dogs. So practicing in heel position, I think, is a good idea, but you can practice in front first as well. So here we're going to start by looking at the pouch and the dog. So being able to visually spot the pouch and the dog with my hand neutral is going to make it a little bit easier for me to be successful. So again, good mechanics. I click and then I reach. There's a separation between clicking and reaching. Now we're going to put my hand on my belly. Same procedure. Hand goes to belly, click, reach, feed, hand, click, reach, feed. All of these are separated out. So now we're going to make the target smaller. So the end of this cone is very, very, very tiny. So having to hit such a small target is another good exercise to practice. And again, I'm using a treat pouch I don't usually use, which is good for me to practice. Because what your equipment you use makes a big difference. So in this part of the exercise, I'm looking ahead instead of looking at the cone. So now we're imagining that I am heeling with my dog. I'm looking ahead at where I want to go, but I'm looking out the side of my eyeball at my dog. I click for what I want. Now I have to turn and feed my dog. Okay, now I've changed the location of my treat pouch. So now my treat pouch is behind me, kind of like on my butt, basically, and I need to reach for the food. Now this is going to take longer, and I'm going to have to practice my physical skills here to be able to reach behind me and then hit my target. And again, it's click, then hand, then feed, then return to neutral. Click, hand, feed, return to neutral. Okay, so now all of those exercises that I just did, the level up portion of that is to do that same thing with the card exercise we did before. So you have your phone or your computer screen in front of you, you're playing your cards, but I would recommend doing it at like 25% to start. And you're going to pick a suit. And every time you see that suit, that's like you seeing the behavior you want from your dog. So you click for seeing the suit, then you reach for the food, then you put it in the dog's mouth, and then you continue that through your deck of cards. So you're going to play that game with all of the mechanics drills that we just did. I didn't do videos of all those things because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have questions about it, just put them down in the comments below there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about preloaded hand multi-treat management because I want you to see what my hand looks like when I'm feeding multi-treats above my dog's head in heel position. So I've got a handful of food. I put them down towards my fingertips. I roll the first one out. I feed to the dog. My hand goes back up. So notice there's a very distinct difference to the dog between what my hand looks like when we're feeding and when we're not feeding. So I just did a little closer view for you to see as well, because this is one of the harder exercises. All right. So along with all of this, right, sometimes we're going to have a leash with us. So we need to now integrate. Now we've got our clicking on point. We're looking at what we want. We're clicking for it. We've got our treat management so we can get our treat and we can hit our target. And now we need to add a leash to the mix. So how do we add that leash? Well, we can start without our dog. So that is the setup that you're going to see here. So at first I tether the leash to something. So don't let your leash just drag on the ground because it's going to mess with the weighting of the leash in your hands. Leash management skills could be its own seminar, honestly. But what I see most often is people hanging a bunch of crap off of their leash. Don't do it. It's going to mess with your ability to be an effective leash handler. And the reason I tether it during this exercise is this will be tethered to your dog's neck. It won't be dropped to the ground and it'll feel different. So we're going to set it up. I don't care what you tether it to. It can be a doorknob, whatever, just so that the leash isn't dangling on the ground. So I set up my leash. And now we're going to look at leash skills for rewarding when our dog is in heel position. And again, this works on both sides of your dog. So I've got the leash in both hands, say. So I've got my, I don't know if this is appropriate, but my left hand's my precision hand. My right hand's my oh shit hand, as in, oh shit, my dog is pulling. Kind of thing. It's my, my right hand's my stronger hand. So I use my left hand for precision if my dog is heeling on the left hand side. So we're imagining a two-handed leash setup in this case where I've got my leash in my left hand and my right hand. How do I go about treating with my left hand if my leash is in that left hand? So we're going to practice that. So we click. And our food is on our left-hand side closest to our dog, and we give the left hand leash to the right hand, which drapes it down, and then we feed from our left hand, and then we retain it, put it back. So we're basically, our right hand comes, sorry, I'm doing this backwards. Okay, so our left hand and our right hand hold the leash. We want to treat with our left hand. So our right hand is going to come closer to our left hand. Our left hand passes off the length of leash that it was holding so that the leash stays the same length. Treat with your left hand, give to your dog, and then pick up your left hand leash. This is why we're practicing it away from your dog, because all of that is hard to say, but once you practice it a bunch of times, it'll be second nature to be able to do this little maneuver. So let's watch it a few times. So hand grabs it, click, move over, food, and regrip. This same procedure works if you keep your leash in your left hand. And you can get faster as you start practicing. Okay, so now we're going to say, okay, I've been walking the dog with the leash in the left hand. What do? My right hand comes across to grip the leash and then gets taken up by the left hand. So I mark, hand comes across, right hand grabs it, feed the dog, and it goes back into my left hand. All of these are physical skills that you can learn and become better at as you go. So that is why we're practicing them away from your dog, so that you can become a better handler for your dog and a cleaner handler, and you're going to feel more confident when you're able to do these skills more effectively. All right, so we're going to talk about feeding strategies. So I'm going to show you why I don't feed across the body. A lot of trainers do it. I may on occasion do it, but I can't think of the last time I fed across my body. I just don't do it, because even with the best mechanics, turning your body to feed your dog knows where the food comes from and it's across your body and wants to forge ahead. So just watch me feed across my body. And that first one is like a poorly done one. But then the next one is a pretty good one. Like, oh, I can just tilt my body more. But watch my dog's head return to my right-hand side every time. I don't love that, especially not for service dog work. Now, instead, I can feed to the outside of my dog's face on the same side, same hand on the same side of the body that my dog is on. And now I've got a dog that is straight aligned with me, not crossing over, not likely to forge. You're still getting those eyes up, right? Like you're not reducing the amount of eyes up that you get in between. And hand returns to belly. That was the other important part here is my hand returns to my belly afterwards so that the dog knows when they're getting fed. So hand returns to belly, hand returns to belly, hand returns to belly each time. It's very clear when food is present and when it's not. Okay, so now I'm going to show you different feeding methods for while you're walking. The reason I'm showing you this is because I was working with a client recently and the dog was young and new to taking food because a young dog has to learn how to take food. And one of the things it was doing, it was like chomping on the food and like taking a while to eat. When we feed lower, it's easier for the dog to swallow and continue on. When we feed higher, for a lot of dogs, it can be harder to get that down their throat. Just like if we're eating like this, it's much harder to eat like that than it is to eat straight on. So I just want to show you the difference in body position and how we feed. So if I feed low, it's easy for him to eat it. Whereas if I feed high, I've got a higher body position, kind of more prancy step, but he's dipping his head every time to eat it. So we've got low feeding, and then watch him dip his head to eat after each thing. Now, can that be trained out? For sure. And can they get better at feeding that way? But if you have a dog that takes a while to chew, sometimes feeding lower can be helpful in getting more reps in of whatever it is that you're working on, like loose leash walking. Okay, so now we're going to do multi-treat, dog in front, releasing one treat at a time. So now I've got my handful of treats again, and I'm pushing that one kibble or treat out in front. This is an example of like if you were doing canine conditioning exercises, don't look at his body as an example of that. I was just trying to show you something, and he's 14 and a half now, so he's doing his thing. But I'm feeding that one treat at a time, each rep, but my hand is loaded. So I've got, in this particular case, my hand is like a little egg, and I'm pushing one treat forward and then kind of letting him lick it out of the center here and pull it out of the center. But I can use these two fingers to push it up if I need to. Okay, so now I'm going to show you my mouthy dog method. So I worked adolescent German Shepherd dogs for many years, and they are mouthy when they come in, some of them. So I want to show you the method that I use for single treat feeding to pretty much never get my hands bit. So I'll show you that now. So I got one treat. I put it down into the meaty portion of my thumb and first finger. So I'm basically cradling it between the edge of my thumb and the first finger. And then when I present it to the dog, it's like presenting a carrot to a horse that you don't want to get bit. It's a flat palm. So you can see this. So I feed it, flat palm, disappears. Dog can't bite my hand because the hand is flat. So I've got it there and push it back. So I got my flat palm, no snacks. Jason. Jason. You can either do it flat or like a cup, like I did in the last one. If your treat is a little bit harder to hold, you can do it like a little cup. But it makes no fingers in the way, easy for the dog to target basically your hand and grab what they need without chewing on you, which is always really nice. And then finally, I want to talk about other food delivery methods. So one of the great methods that you can use if you don't have a lot of dexterity in your hands, or you've got a short dog, or for whatever other reason, is to use the Target Stick spoon. So you don't have to wrap yours in tape like mine. I also use this as a Target stick sometime, but you just get a wooden spoon or a spatula. You're going to smear it with something the dog likes, like peanut butter or cream cheese or gross fish stuff, whatever. And you're going to give them basically like 2 licks or so for every mark and reinforce. Then you can keep the peanut butter jar open in your treat pouch to re-dip if you need to. So I'm going to show you that. Important here is the feeding position. Okay, so it is turned on, turned off. Here is when I feed, here is when food is not available. If it is by your nose, food is available. If it is by my belly, food is not available. Black and white, making it easier for your dog to understand when food is available, when they're being reinforced. So you see return, and it's feed, return, feed, return. Or alternatively, I can flip it over. So like if you're worried about, what I wanted to show you there is if you were worried about getting it on your shirt, you can keep the licky side out and then just flip your hand over if that's easier. I have no idea why she's just sitting staring at me like that, but it worked out really, really well for this example. Okay, so now we're going to look at, I wanted to talk a little bit more about other treat delivery methods that can be helpful for you. So one of the things is the pet tutor. I'm just going to grab it. Hold on. Let me stop share. Okay. Hold on one sec. Okay. So this is the pet tutor. They don't make this version anymore. They make a smaller version, I believe, but sometimes you can get these used. This is quite an investment in regards to tools for training, but I've used this very successfully in a lot of situations, especially for, it has a setting. If your dog is barky in the crate, you can use it. It will basically go off when they don't bark, which is kind of cool. But it's a food robot, right? So it's got a clicker, or you can use your phone. Food goes in the top of it, and when you click, it goes down. So that's a great option if you need to treat far away from your dog, if you have dexterity issues. The other thing is you can set this that when you shake it, it activates the tutor. So basically you shake the clicker. So even if you don't have the ability to click the button, you can even put it under your foot, click it when it goes under your foot. Put this in a Kong wobbler, kick the Kong wobbler, it goes off. There's a slight bit of latency, which I don't like it, and I don't know if the new one is a little bit updated. This one is, like I said, is probably like 7 years old or so. But that a food robot is a great option. There's also a wheelchair setup for it. So the new ones have a wheelchair mount. So if you're using a wheelchair, your dog, and it's got a little plate, and your dog knows that they can go right in there to get their food. So that's an option. Another option is a tube, or a tube with like a ladle at the end of it. So imagine PVC pipe, you're sliding the food down the PVC pipe into the ladle for your dog to eat. So instead of the peanut butter on a spoon, it's tube with a ladle. Is it a little more unwieldy? Sure. But if you don't have, if you need a way to deliver food low quickly, that's a way. And if you're working on like a stay, you can just use the PVC pipe and slide the food down that way. So those are some of the different options for that. There's also the Treat and Train. Might be called the Manners Minder. It's one of those, Treat and Train or Manners Minder. It's the first one that I had. And that's another food robot that can work out well if you need some remote treating options. All right, so let me show some real life handling, and then we'll wrap this up. So real life use: feeding on the side of dog, feeding slightly to outside, hand returns to neutral. Show you that. So this is an example. We were working this little, probably should have slowed it down. Maybe I will slow it down. I can. All right, playback speed. 0.5 seems really slow, but we'll try it. Okay, so this is Bixby. So this is Eve's little puppy that we were working. So notice that I'm feeding to the outside of the dog's face to keep their hind end, and see how I'm feeding and the dog's hind end is naturally coming in towards me, creating straightness. That's what we're looking for. And then we ask them to follow the treat behind. We get a nice straight behind. And then we move them back to our side and again, feeding them. And we're using that multi-treat delivery. So you can see my 2 fingers there doing that multi-treat delivery option, which is what I wanted to use for this dog. And then I do a hand touch at the end here. So again, I do a hand touch to set him up. I'm going to load my hand with multiple treats. I feed to the outside, multi-treat delivery. And that really shows how much that turns that button. So I've got a dog here that is not lined up. I have them do a hand touch. They push back out a little bit. And then I do my outside of the feet hand. Now, some of this goes along with you need to do hind end awareness, bucket work, heel work type of stuff. But if you don't feed to the outside, you're never going to get that straightness for a dog that naturally wants to get in front of you and look at you, because, which is what we teach most of our dogs, is that they should get in front of us and look at us. And that's not very helpful out in a public access situation. So again, I have multiple treats in my hand and I'm feeding a single treat out. Okay. All right. So that was just a little example of what that looked like in real life. I am going to come back to you here. So hopefully that was helpful. If you've watched this recording, your next step would be to go back, get your clicker, get your treats, and practice these exercises. Even for 90 seconds a day, you will become a better handler. You will become better at the physical mechanics of doing the job of being a trainer. And that will make your training more clear, and that reduces frustration for both you and your dog. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, put them down in the Patreon comments below. And I will see